My name's Jana, and I'd like to let you know that down at the Feng Shui Center, and I'm the owner of the Feng Shui Center, every Thursday at noon we have a free lecture, and we have different metaphysical speakers. So we try to get in some of the local speakers and people from out of town when they come through town. So we hope to see you there at the Feng Shui Center every Thursday at noon. And if you want more information about which lecture is coming up, you can call us down at 543-7677. Okay, I also would like to tell everybody about the Oasis Wednesday night series. And Mel and Stephanie run that at Wild Ground. And that's every Wednesday night starting at 7:30. And for more information, you can call them at 327-7977.
Thanks for joining us in exploring metaphysical and holistic concepts. And before we get started with the guest tonight, I wanted to thank Oasis Productions, New Earth Magazine, and Starhaven Productions for the wonderful festival yesterday. I hope a lot of you got to participate, and if not, there's always one next year. It's really worthwhile. And I wanted to let everybody know this is our last night for live call-ins for another 6 weeks. We're going on a vacation. The whole crew is going on a vacation for a few weeks. And so please take advantage of calling our guest tonight and asking her questions. She's very, very knowledgeable, and it'll be well worth your while. And when we get back in August, we'll have a whole new set of guests with live call-ins again. And in the meantime, we've got new taped shows that haven't been shown before. So I hope you enjoy all of those and have a wonderful July. And today we have with us Dr. Virginia Osborne, and some of the topics we'll be discussing are immunizations and naturopathy, and maybe we'll even get to fluoridation. Thank you very much for being with us tonight.
It's a pleasure.
And I wanted to ask you, I think to start out with, what is naturopathy? What is that field?
The field of naturopathic medicine, which I have chosen, is an education process that I went through. It's a postgraduate medical school program that I attended the one in Portland, Oregon.
Okay.
And it involves using all of the modalities that the body can inherently use to heal itself. And so we learn all of our basic sciences and that kind of thing, so we understand the body well enough. And then the specialty areas like any medical school program, except that we have the nutrition, the botanicals, homeopathy, hydrotherapy, to name a few of the things that we get involved with. And there are many, many other modalities that we can certainly do individually, outside the classroom.
So it sounds like one of the underpinnings of the whole thing, the philosophy behind it, is that the body has the ability to heal itself from most things. And with these other things, the botanicals and the herbs, actually that might be the same thing, hydrotherapy, might be refreshing the body's memory on how to...
Well, it does that as well as help boost it. If in fact, the host being ourselves, if we are depleted in some form or another, it will help regenerate that. If our digestive tract, which we believe as naturopathic physicians is, sort of the crux of a lot of diseases, that if we help repair that, then the body tends to be able to get that domino effect, if you will, and helping itself. But there are times when you need to help boost it. Also, if somebody's illness has gone so far, you need to bring it back to its healing or healthier state. So you have to help it along to heal with botanicals and hydrotherapies and the homeopathics. And there are some people who, in their belief system, the pharmaceuticals are important, or it is what is needed at that moment, to help get them over the crisis that they're in. And that's the belief system also that we deal with. And so you really meet them where they are and work from there.
So what would be the difference in allopathic medicine?
Well, allopathic, conventional, there's all kinds of terms running around now. The difference is that there's a fairly defined modality that they use and that they're educated with. And, they have, the great ability, not only just the pharmaceuticals that are available to them, but if you look at the trauma care that they have available, I mean, there's nothing really that can equal, putting back somebody once they've been in a car accident. That's, we really give them a lot of credit for, that particular medicine. And they certainly have a lot of other things. And like any medicine, they're really new on the block, basically. I mean, it's been in this century that they've really taken off with their defined approach and their education and the processes that they're using. And it is very defined, and they have not had in their history much nutritional education. So they're not very well versed on it. You can talk to many physicians who really don't understand it that well unless they've gone on their own to learn it. So they're not able to counsel their patients on any dietary changes. And most often they'll say, oh, you don't need to make any changes. Well, in fact, what are we feeding ourselves, and what is supporting ourselves? And a lot of times we find that what's a diet that might be fine for you is not fine for me or for the next person sitting next to you or for, your partner. I mean, it's that kind of thing that you have to look at the individual and what works most appropriately in their home metabolism and how they themselves are.
So how would you determine that? What sorts of questions? I mean, do you have a usual form that people fill out?
Oh, I do.
What kind of things do you ask them?
I mean, I got to the point where, I was asking the questions anyway, so I figured if they could just fill out the form, then we could just get on with it, because
Right.
a lot of things that weren't pertinent, and I could just skim right through, and I could easily get a picture when I look at how they responded as to really where to start with them. So yeah, and mine's fairly lengthy, and I don't make any excuses for that. The basic information about their birthday and all the things. Mm-hmm. But what I also ask initially is what have your illnesses been? What would you like to work on? So, and I have them listed, so I see what their number one priority is, what's most important to them to work on, and then we go from there, because they may have several major things going on, and we have to take it one at a time.
And what would be different from your form from, like on a Western medicine form, there'll be history, ancestry of disease, and do you smoke? If you go to an OB/GYN, it'll be how old were you when you had your first period? And
well, I ask all those questions.
You ask all those?
I ask all the female questions, I ask all the male questions. I go in detail of all the systems, and just some pertinent questions along the way. We can get more detail later, but there's just the joint pain, muscle pain, cardiac problems, if there's been any respiratory problems, so I can get a fairly good picture. I mean, even I ask about, when I'm asking about the eyes, ears, nose, and throat, and the head, what about the dental? I ask about how many amalgams they've had, or the fillings, and what kind, and because now we have a lot of composites that are available. But anyway, so that's the point is, where are they with their health care?
Now, most babies they're either doing breast milk or formula. And so I would think that their digestive systems are in pretty good condition, which would lead to pretty good health all around. Is that true?
Well, we are born into this life with what we have, and we sure hope that we got the best of the genetic DNA that was given to us from our parents. And so, yes, we hope that the digestive tract is always the healthiest when we're born. It's not always the case. And that's where you get into, the problems of where genetically are they? Is there a genetic predisposition to a problem that, may just really cloud or even give you a clear picture as to the health care? So if, say, you have your typical healthy child, then you look at the digestive tract should be pretty healthy, pretty good shape.
And I'm probably approaching this in an odd spot, but sort of jumping ahead, why did we start using immunizations at such a young age, 2 months and 4 months?
Because that worked out better for the practitioner.
How so?
Because the child would come in at the 2-week and the 4-week and the 6-week visit. So they found that would be the time to just start them, because they would see them then, and a lot of times they wouldn't see them then for another 6 months or a year. So they just started them at that time, because it was more convenient for the practitioner.
So it's not necessarily appropriateness of age?
No.
Just availability?
Exactly.
If you were going to do immunizations, how old would you start a child?
Would I recommend that?
Yeah.
Well, I would say
I just put you on the spot.
Yeah,
right away.
well, it's my own personal opinion. Everybody's got their opinion about it. Any practitioner you talk to, would have probably different saying about that. But I feel like the older they are, the better off they are. And if they're breastfeeding, they get a lot of immunization from the breast milk and a lot of immune boosting qualities. So, the older they are, the better off they are. And so, whether it's waiting until 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, some, have never had them at all, and the parents just feel that that's not an appropriate approach to healthcare for their children. And some, then decide that maybe when they're 6 or 7 years old that they should have them, or they end up talking to some physician who convinces them that that's the way to go, and so they then have everybody vaccinated.
Oh, so many questions. So,
To start.
what is the whole idea behind immunizations?
Well, the whole idea, the rationale behind the immunizations was that it would build up antibodies in the body so that when, say an epidemic or something would come through, that the body would already be responding to that when it would happen. But what they're finding is that, in fact, more children who have been immunized become more susceptible to it than those who have not.
Oh, that's interesting. And the craziest thing happened after I hung up on the phone with you and you confirmed that you would be here. NPR was on, and they said in the next 10 years, the recommendation is going to go from 13 immunizations for kids to 34. And that just overwhelmed me. I thought, oh my gosh. That just seems to be a lot to give the system to work with.
Well, I would agree with you on that.
13 seems a lot to me.
Yeah, I would agree with that too, yeah.
I'm jumping ahead again. What's the motivation for jumping 13 to 34? What are the new fears? What are the new diseases that people think we need to be immunized against?
Well, that I probably can't answer where the initiation of all that really is. I mean, is it our government? Is it our drug companies? Is it, what is behind that? Is it a fiscal motivation, or is it something that they really feel is important that everybody be immunized? And I can't figure out where that's coming from, because there's documentation from even the World Health Organization that even in third world countries, that when they've improved the hygiene and the sanitation in those countries, so will diminish the diseases. And so has happened, even in our own history, before they started immunizations, that a lot of these diseases had decreased. And even with smallpox, when we went from outhouses to indoor plumbing, you saw a radical decrease in smallpox.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it doesn't even exist here anymore.
But it's resurged in other areas. There's been a resurgence of it, I've heard.
I've heard that too.
Yeah. I don't know about it specifically, but...
And I would question, why is it resurging? Is it that it's been lying dormant, or is it that it's been re-inoculated?
Oh.
And there's documentation about viruses that have been inoculated into people, and so there's that venue as well.
Oh, that's a whole another controversy.
That is a whole other discussion, but yeah, that's out there.
Now, I'm going to jump around, I'm sorry, it's just I've been
Well, we'll try to stay with you.
looking at this for a while, and I have lots of different strange little questions. I've heard polio in the last 10 years, the only cases in this country have been from kids that are inoculated with the live polio.
That's correct.
There haven't been any other types of polio?
No, even in the 50s when they first started the polio vaccination, that the rise, that they noticed the rise 57, 58, and I think 59, after the polio vaccinations were given, there was a rise in polio. And, and I have to, agree that there have been older people who lived in the 20s and 30s and you don't know what it was like back then. I said, no, I don't.
Right.
But at one point, I can also say, when they argue for the immunizations, I can say, but sanitation also has improved since that period of time. So we have documentation now that with improved hygiene, with improved fresh fruits and vegetables, refrigeration, that the disease process has decreased.
And it's not a far jump for me to connect that with poverty levels, the hygiene.
No, I
hygiene.
don't think that's a very far jump at all.
Immunizations. How many immunizations is a 2-month-old supposed to have now?
Oh, well, there's actually one, I think, even at birth that they were giving, which was I just lost it. Maybe someone caller can help me out with that one, but it is, I think it's the flu vaccine. I might be wrong about that, but there is one that they started.
Diarrhea, you know. They have a new one for diarrhea.
Well, they have a new one for diarrhea. They have one that they've been trying to push for chicken pox.
Yeah.
And, you know, of course, there's hepatitis B now that for all the children in the schools. And when my children were going through school and they wanted to give them hepatitis B vaccinations, I said, well, why aren't you then creating, where are the covers for the toilet seats then if you think that this is such a problem?
Right.
Where's the emphasis on hand washing? I mean, this is the kind of thing we need to be educating our children about. But you know, the easy way out is just to inoculate them with hepatitis B. And any parent, I mean, and this is one thing I want to say about pro or con immunizations, is that it's really truly the parent's decision, and that they need to become educated in both venues. What is out there for them to work with, and what are their responsibilities? If their child gets sick and they haven't had them immunized, they are responsible to be right there with their child as they go through a disease process. And that's where I've known many people who have chosen not to have their children vaccinated, and not that many have had the diseases. And when they did, they were right there with their child and healed them right through the process.
And this will sound sort of like hearsay. I have a friend who did homeopathic alternative version of immunizations through homeopathy, which is minute parts of flowers and things like that.
Minerals, other minerals.
And her son was exposed to measles, never got that, was exposed to chickenpox and had a high fever for one day, and that was it. And that boosting of the immune system for him seemed to have really worked. And that was, I was just amazed. I was like, wow, that's really great.
This is the thing that I think is really important is that, you know, at the same time that we had the germ theory coming up with Pasteur, we also had the host theory coming up. But Pasteur got, you know, more press, you might say, for the day. And, you know, that's what's been with us. But it is really truly believed that we as the host are the ones that if we keep our immune systems up, if we keep ourselves healthy, yes, we will carry viruses with us, but they will not become predominant in our system until we are at a place where our immune system becomes depleted, or that we become worn out, that we don't get enough rest, we don't eat the right foods, we don't get enough exercise. Three basic things, you know, that are very inherent in how, you know, we can be a healthy individual.
Have you ever had to counsel somebody coming in with their kids?
I have.
You have? And what have they chosen?
Well, it was actually a controversy between a husband and a wife.
Okay.
I'll use that one in particular experience because there's others who have gone on to use alternative methods and those who have chosen to do the immunizations. But this particular one debated for quite a while. The husband didn't want them at all. The wife was leaning toward the immunizations, but was still really open to listening to alternative. And the one thing that you have to remember, there's lots of questions you have to ask before you get a vaccination or you have your children vaccinated. You know, is this something that you truly believe will help your child? And if your belief system is truly that, and you instill that in your child, I mean, like any medicine or any belief, it will be there in that regard. I mean, it's one of the things that you have to know is how healthy is your child at that point? How vulnerable are they going to be if they get an immunization? You know, what is it that they are getting? Do the research on it. There's plenty out there. We're in this technological age right now where it is accessible everywhere. You can get on websites, you can get on, you know, just anywhere in the computer and, you know, look this up. I mean, it's out there. The information is there. And the thing that I feel like I can't stress enough is educate yourself before you make the decision. And don't allow anybody to pressure you into one or the other until you yourself feel comfortable with it. And in that case of that family, because we went back and forth for quite a while with them, and they decided not to.
They didn't?
And they had 5 children.
Oh, so none of them got it?
No.
Oh, wow. And they're pretty healthy?
They're all very healthy.
And now, I've heard that there's a push sometimes from nurses and doctors that a child who isn't immunized will somehow place everybody else at higher risk. What is that about?
Well, I think, again, that's a belief system that if you have a child who's not been immunized, that they are more susceptible to getting the disease and then spreading it to the others.
But how can they spread it to the others if these immunizations are so...
Well, exactly. Sort of the backward thought is that really what happens in any school system, because they do require that all children be immunized, they have clauses where you can, object to that, and that your child can still attend the school even if they're not immunized.
Religious exemptions?
Religious exemptions, philosophical exemptions, health reasons. There are a number of different ways, and you have to really check with the school system you're in order to know what their guidelines are and what their rules are. And the one stipulation I do know is that if you choose not to immunize, that if there is any kind of disease, running through the school, chickenpox, measles, that you will probably ask to hold your child out of school until that is passed.
Okay.
And they will ask that to happen. So then you're responsible for your child's education as well.
Okay.
And that becomes a bit of homeschooling at that point. And it's a little tough for parents who are working. And they both parents are out there working, but you have to make that decision and who's going to do what.
Well, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about all that part of it. Now, let's pick on a couple immunizations, or highlight them, I should say. Now, hepatitis B vaccine, I understand, is a genetically manufactured, that it could possibly actually change your DNA. Is that true?
Well, I think that it's true. I think that, it depends on the individual and how their body would respond to it.
Okay. And I've heard that they're actually not getting a whole lot of success with it as far as exposure. Some of the things I've read have said that people actually are getting more Hep B, as a group, after the vaccinations than another group who's not getting it with the same exposure.
That's true.
That is true.
And that's true for most of the vaccinations.
That's true for most of the vaccinations. Let me stick with Hep B for just a second. Now this, I didn't know about the toilet seats. I heard it was only blood-borne, that you'd actually have to share a needle or become blood sisters.
It's fluid.
It's any fluid, any bodily fluid. So if I sneeze, I can give Hep B to somebody else if I have?
Well, not necessarily with sneezing, but what I think you're confusing that with Hep C. Hep C is really with needles.
Okay.
And that's where you find most of your hepatitis C coming from, shared needles. And, there's, it's coming to light now. 20, 30 years later, there's a lot of people showing up with this, because of activities done back, 20, 30 years ago. And currently, there's people still doing that. But there's a lot more awareness of that now. So there's, especially in the cities, you'll have clinics that are set up specifically so users will come in and, get clean needles, because they know they're not going to change their habits. And so they might as well at least try to keep them, from getting any more diseases than they're going. I mean, it's like...
That seems pretty humane.
So that's a side thing that's going on. But hepatitis B is considered to be, so when I say, having toilet seat covers, it's because what is left on the toilet seat? What happens if, there was somebody who was left, some kind of fluid on the toilet seat? Because they can live for a pretty long time.
In low temperatures compared to body temperature?
Right.
Okay.
That's why there was always this big concern about toilet seats and not sitting on them and that kind of thing. I mean, yes, a lot of it is not as serious as they initially let it believe, but there's still that evidence that it's still there, and that's why, we try to train our children not to do that and to be aware of those things. And so, yeah, I mean, but to me it was like, why don't we educate them how to avoid hepatitis B instead of, just inoculating them.
Who has the most Hep B in the country?
The gay population.
Oh, the gay population. And so that's not from sexual practices, or is it?
Well, that's one way, yes.
Okay. And nurses and doctors sometimes get it?
Well, sure, because you think about the conditions that they're working in.
Okay.
And, I mean, if you're working around people who are injured and there's blood and there's fecal matter and fluids of all kinds, you're going to, if you have even your eyes exposed, you can get it direct through the mucous membranes.
Okay. Are many kids exposed to it?
To my knowledge, no.
I'm just wondering why 2-month-olds are
being vaccinated.
offered. Yeah.
I guess that's what it was. I was trying to get before when I said influenza. It's the hepatitis B vaccination that they're giving now to infants, and that's so relatively new to me, because it's like I couldn't believe it when they started doing that. I was just a little stunned and surprised that they felt that was necessary. But the reason for that is, and I think that stemmed out of actually mothers who had hepatitis B or were users or were, still, having lots of practices that, so they were trying to help, I guess, prevent the child from developing hepatitis B. I'm really not clear about why that started.
Yeah, I'm confused about that policy. Why would they
So we'll
wouldn't
just
just aim at why they wouldn't just aim at those kids, the kids with moms with more exposure, instead of just across the board?
Well, that's just generally how it works. It's just that if you do everybody across the board, then you at least get those who have it.
And what risks come along with any vaccination? What are the risks to the child? Are there risks?
There are many risks.
Okay.
Illness, death.
What kind of illnesses? And
Usually we talk about the neurological illnesses, the epilepsy and the problems that they develop in their spinal systems. Certainly there's fevers and digestive problems, and the sudden infant death syndrome has been linked to that.
So SIDS might be connected with this.
Yeah, actually, I have just some information here. There was a case of a child who died 33 hours after his first TPT shot. And this was published in the Harris Coulter book, A Shot in the Dark. Now, when the child's mother confronted the pediatrician, she was met with denial of vaccine implication. And the coroner also denied any connection by stating that death was due to irreversible shock. When the mother explained in detail what had taken place, the coroner stated he could not put down that the child had died of a DPT reaction because it would jeopardize the state's immunization programs. So the public has been indoctrinated to believe disease prevention equals vaccination, and that's really true. I mean, there's just this evening, I was talking with a gentleman whose daughter has a young child, and she said, I'm going with what my doctor tells me. And that's fine, but be sure you're well educated about that choice before you go there.
And this is one of my biggest concerns about the whole thing, is that the agenda is more important than the truth. And from what I've understood and read, so many cases of reactions are not being reported. Doctors across the board, not everyone obviously, but there's a big resistance on doctors' parts to
report the reactions to the vaccines. And that's been true in the past, that the amount of reactions to vaccines are probably about 1/10 of those are reported.
1/10 of the reactions.
Yeah.
And they're allowed to report potential reactions. They don't have to say, this is definitive, we've got the documentation. Can't they just call up and say, this may or may not have been a reaction, but guys should write it down?
Well, yes.
They can do that? Okay. But only 10% are being reported. And most kids have regular pediatricians. It's not like they're not being seen by a physician, and not seeing the possible repercussions of all of this. Now, I guess we're only using the 10%. How many kids die every year from vaccines?
You know what? I don't really have that statistic with me.
Okay.
I don't really know, but
it does happen.
It does happen.
Do you know which vaccine is more commonly connected with death?
Well, the DPT shot is one of the initial ones that's given. So the pertussis has been aimed at, and the diphtheria. Tetanus has its own source, but generally speaking, the pertussis is the one that people can ask to avoid and just get a DT shot, which is a diphtheria tetanus.
And you think that's better?
Well,
than a DPT?
It's an improvement.
Okay. And I think we're about to take a break. When we get back, I want to ask about what is in the vaccines. What's in that shot that we're giving to our kids and ourselves? And I hope you've got information about that too?
I do.
Okay, great.
So I'll wait till we come back?
Okay, yes. And we have two wonderful musicians coming up, and I think you're really going to enjoy them. They're with us just before they're on their way to India, I believe. Or is it India, you guys? Malaysia. I'm very sorry. Malaysia. And I heard you guys yesterday. You're wonderful. Thanks very much for being here. Thank you, Krishna and Yuva. That was beautiful. And they'll be back with us again around 9 o'clock to do another set. And what are the names of those instruments?
Harmonium and tabla.
Harmonium and tabla. And tabla is the drums, and the harmonium is the sort of a combination of a piano and an accordion. It sounds beautiful. Thank you very much. Okay, and we will be having call-ins probably in about 10 or 15 minutes, and the number for that is 542-MCAT or 542-6228. Actually, that's the same number, just said differently. And if anyone would like to contact Dr. Virginia Osborne, her number is, do you have to use the 406?
No, not from Missoula.
Okay. 642-3761. It's 642-3761. If anyone would like to contact any of the crew or me, the number is 829-9162. My email is htruog, T-R-U-O-G, @yahoo.com. And we still have a lot to cover as far as the immunization questions that I've got anyway. Hopefully we'll get through them before the call-ins. I guess we should get back to that first one. What is in a typical immunization? What's in the shot?
Well, aside from the particular disease, if you will, that they would like to immunize you, there's other viral particles, bacterial particles that can be added into that, protein, neutralizers, and I'm sure there's a few other things that they can decide. So there's plenty in there other than what you're actually being inoculated for.
And some of the preservatives can include formaldehyde.
They can.
And why would heavy metals be in there? I've heard some of these have heavy metals in there.
Right. Well,
do you know why?
No, I don't know exactly why the heavy metals would be, introduced in that, or how they find the balance in there that they decide that would be, maybe they feel that it would enhance it more. I really can't.
Okay. And the nurse told me it's just trace amounts. I still wasn't sure why we wanted to put that in our arms, but more is in there than we are usually made aware of.
That's right, and that's why the important thing is to become educated about it. What exactly are you giving your child or having your child be given? And the other thing is that it doesn't just go into the muscle, it can go right into the bloodstream, and that's where your liver, and especially if you have a young infant, their liver isn't fully developed yet.
Oh, it's not?
No, especially a lot of them you'll see at birth, they don't have the ability to process the whole filtration process, if you will, with their liver. That's a lot of where jaundice is, because the liver isn't quite functioning appropriately yet, and that's where your babies turn yellow.
And I've never thought about it that way. We don't expect to feed them food till 4 or 6 months, but we expect them to be able to handle this cocktail. I've heard them called cocktails.
Right, cocktails, right. And the thing is, too, that babies, or children, or infants, are not really ready for foods until about 6 months of age. That's when their bodies are really most appropriately prepared for starting out with, the rice or the real minor non.
And that has to do with the development of the intestines?
Intestines and the liver and the immune system.
But I'm a big proponent of nursing. That just assimilates right into the system. I mean, it's totally genetically, nutritionally engineered exactly for what a baby needs.
Yeah, right. Which, that gets all into the discussion about when, they decided to bottle feed in third world countries, and that's when children became sicker.
And, that's a whole big issue, too.
Another time.
Okay. So, getting back to educating ourselves and being responsible, it's very tempting to let the doctor make all the decisions. He or she is the one with all the training, all the expertise, but what responsibility do they have in the long run if something happens to your baby?
Well, they're getting pretty well protected these days. I think with, we were talking about earlier during the break about what kind of laws have been passed at this point. And before we get into that, though, you were talking about how, the protection that they have, but also when you talked about when you go to see the physician and they're pretty adamant about the immunizations. And I'm not here tonight to talk about, the pro-immunization. I'm here to talk more about the alternatives, because they're both sides to that. And I think it's important for people to be aware of.
That's true.
And that's the difference between, I think, a naturopathic physician and a medical doctor physician, is that because we feel that we are there as a partner to work with the patient or with the family and to give them the information and help them make the decisions. Yes, we have the educational background, so we can help guide them in different questions they have or give them information that they may not be readily aware of, and not tell them exactly what they have to do, unless, you know, we see a disease process and we say, look, this is what's going to help you with this. I mean, everybody finally has their final decision what they're going to do about that, whether they choose to take a medication or not take a medication, take a supplement or not take one. You know, same idea with immunizations. You know, that we have also been led to believe that antibiotics are our only source or resource when we have infections or when we feel sick. And there are so many other options available to us alternatively for that. And so the same thing with immunizations. It's something that you have to make a choice with, and it is something that you live with when you make that choice to have an immunization or not. You know, the doctor's not going to be there when your child gets sick. They're not going to be responsible for if there's a reaction to that immunization.
And they're covered, and the pharmaceutical companies are covered too.
Right, and that was that law that was passed in 1986.
I think that's what is in your paperwork. And can you explain how that covers them for loss or risk?
Let me just, you know, this documented right here. And,
okay.
And before I get started, I probably should give recognition to the National Vaccine Information Center.
Okay.
And this is in Vienna, Virginia. Their phone number is 1-800-909-SHOT. They're at 512 West Maple Avenue. And they have a number of different things here that parents should be aware of. And this is, at this point, what we're talking about. If your child is left permanently brain damaged or dies as a result of a vaccine reaction, you may be entitled to benefits under the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act of 1986. So, and they did a study in 1999. As of that date, or that year, 1,000 families have been compensated at a cost of $1 billion. But that's only 1,000 families. That's probably many more.
So do you think only 1,000 reported it, or only 1,000 were able to prove it to their satisfaction?
Well, I think that you made that point earlier, was that it's very hard to prove, and so that it's difficult to say, you know, who, as I mentioned before about the case of the child who
the coroner didn't want to pinpoint.
So how do we do that? How do we get, you know, that information, you know, to be proven? Sometimes it's very difficult to do, and that's the hard part.
And I think I'll let callers ask any more difficult questions. I'd like us to talk right now about ways we can boost our children's and our own immune systems. I think you have a list of ways to enhance our health.
Well, the way that one can enhance one's health is certainly the boosting the immune system or keeping the immune system at a healthy place. And we talk about that, and it's, you know, how is the digestive tract? Is that in a healthy state? That will also determine how your immune system is. And ways that, I mean, again, we talked about diet and exercise. Well, an infant's, you know, going to be active all the time when they're awake, as any parent will know. But and that goes on. And if we slow down, so does our body, so does our immune system. And that is very important. And for people who have disabilities, there are other ways that you can start doing that. And interestingly enough, there was a study done, and it was sometime in the last 5 years, and I just heard this recently at a seminar I was at. They did, this was with the elderly, and they went to a nursing home and they took about, 28 elderly people and took them from their usual routines and put them into an exercise routine for a month. And they steadily improved with their ability to exercise as well as their health and their clarity. And then they went back to their nursing home and didn't do any exercise for a month, and it dropped. It dropped below the level that they had been at prior to exercising. Yeah.
And it dropped rapidly?
Well, over the month. Over the month that it dropped. So just to point out how important exercise is, but also nutrition. What are we feeding ourselves? And yeah, it may taste great, but you know, we can adapt to anything. And so are we evolving and adapting to these.
So what do you recommend as far as nutrition? And again, I heard that, you know, different people will have different needs.
Sure, but you know, basically looking at moderation, first of all, is the key to anything. Okay. And so when you're looking at nutrition, you need to look at it that way too. Instead of continually eating sweets all the time, why are you craving those sweets? What is it that you're lacking? Are you lacking protein? Are you lacking some other nutrients that you need to have more vegetables? You know, it's, well, I never liked vegetables. Well, is there a reason why you didn't like vegetables? You know, is it, and with children, you'll watch them. They will like something for one period of time, and the next thing they won't like it, and they'll like something else.
Right.
And it's almost the body's way of saying, okay, I need these nutrients now. Feed me these. And it's a little frustrating for parents. You know, they think they got them on a routine, and they're cruising with it, and then boom, they change. So, you know, the thing you need to look at is vegetables are extremely important, of course, and fruits, vegetables, and proteins, and there are various, you know, stages of protein, and individuals. That's when you have to individualize, because you can have protein that is, you know, in quinoa, which is a complete protein, or amaranth is a complete protein, and that's a grain. But not everybody can eat those grains. You know, some people do better if they have, you know, more of a fish protein. There's also omega-3 fatty acids in the fish that are also beneficial for the body and keeping inflammation down. That's where flaxseed oil can come in, you know, as omega-3.
And I think we have a call here, so let me plug this in. I think I'm plugging this in. There we go. Okay. Hello, caller? Hello? I think we may have just lost that person. Let me try the next line.
Hello.
Hello, do you have a question for Dr. Osborne?
I sure do.
Okay.
I didn't have my kids vaccinated. They were in like the California system, and this was quite a while ago.
Would you mind turning your TV down a little bit, please?
Sure.
We're getting some feedback. Thanks.
Okay. And I wondered, is the feedback better?
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, great. I wondered, because my son joined the Navy and he had to have like 140 extra immunizations.
Oh my God.
Because he didn't have any as a kid. If that had something to do with it, that they had to like catch up on immunizations.
Well, that is the belief, that if you've not had any, that you have to go through a whole inoculation series in order to build up the so-called antibodies. And so it's mandatory in the armed forces now that they inoculate everyone.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you were aware of this. There have been some who have protested that. And at first, I think it was about a year or two ago, there was, I think it was even in the Navy, that a recruit had refused, and they were going to give him a dishonorable discharge, where they protested that too, and won the case. But he was then, of course, honorably discharged and was not to serve out the rest of his term.
Oh, well, I think my son really wanted to do that, but he turned into a medic in the Navy, and he's found like reports where they talk about insect-borne diseases like malaria and such, and including like AIDS and hepatitis B. Do you have any feelings on like mosquitoes and, you know, blood-borne diseases in that realm? Or hepatitis C, I'm sorry, because it's the blood-borne one.
Right. I guess I'm not clear about exactly what your question is about that.
Well, you didn't talk about any knowledge that you had about the possibility that insects might also spread these diseases from.
Right. And I, you know, that's a good question. That's a good point to be made. And I'm quite aware of that, actually, that there are diseases that are insect transported and injected into people. And that's where the malaria concern came in. And when you travel overseas to malaria areas, that you have a whole protocol that you follow to do that. Now, you can take your chances and get malaria, and there are people who have done that, who have been in the armed forces, who have gotten malaria. But the immune system itself, if it is strong, there are those who have overcome that. But, you know, there are definitely people who know that they are weak and that they need to protect themselves. And a lot of times they'll opt for the quinine for malaria. Again, you know, we have an unknown that's starting to happen also with all of the rainforest being cut down, and how many of those that are dormant viruses and bacteria are going to become evident, you know, in time. And how are we going to protect ourselves from that when there is nothing that we have currently to protect ourselves immunologically other than our own bodies to be strong and healthy?
Right. Okay, thanks.
Thank you,
you, Colin. Now, that's another point about immunizations. Do immunizations compromise your system for these unknown things out there?
And in what way are you thinking?
So let's say you have a new disease, X, and you've had your full realm of immunizations and your neighbor hasn't had any. Who do you think would be, in all things being relatively equal, who do you think would be better able to deal with disease X, virus X, whatever it would be?
Virus or bacterial X?
Yeah.
Well, according to the reports that have been documented in the current knowledge of the different immunizations and the different diseases, is that those who have not been immunized have fared better.
They have. And this would be totally probably a personal thing. Do you think it has more to do with your belief system of the strength of your body, or the strength of your body being compromised on a physical level? Are they connected? What would you say is the reason for that?
For, I'm sorry, I didn't quite follow that.
The people without immunizations faring better with X?
A lot of times, if they haven't been, I mean, such as the last gentleman who called in, and his son didn't get inoculated until he was, probably late teens, early 20s.
Right.
His body had that full time to go into full development before it had, the inoculation of viruses into his system. So it was better able to protect himself even with those. Now, again, down the line, once you've had immunizations, they've found that other disease processes pop up, such as arthritis and neuralgias and multiple sclerosis and cancers. I mean, they can go that far to document those things that they have seen coming from people who've been immunized. Now, there's lots of other reasons why that happens, and is it specifically because of immunizations? I don't know that I could say yes or no to that.
Then you could get into the whole spiritual thing about, if it's your time to be ill, it's your time to be ill, and you'll either be ill from the chicken pox, or if you're immunized to that, you'll get the newest form of flu that comes through the area that knocks you down for 2 weeks. That's a whole spiritual...
That's a whole other discussion on itself. I mean, where do you go with that when somebody's extremely ill and they say, well, I brought it on myself? There's a whole host of other reasons why that may have occurred.
Right, and some people might think that that's a really heartless way of looking at it, too. That there's not a lot of humanity.
Well, yeah, especially if somebody's lying there extremely sick, and you try to say that to them.
Right.
It's not what they need at that moment either.
Right.
They need the support, they need the boost, they need the compassion, if you will.
But that happens when you're sick with anything, and I don't know if public policy is a whole different. It should be a whole different set of criteria, I think.
Well, I think you need to look at the whole picture. I mean, be it spiritual, be it nutritional, be it exercise, be it the whole family dynamics, your whole relationship with your community. I mean, the belief system as well as anything else. It's physiologically, where have you come to, your thought process as well. They're both interconnected.
So somebody else has a question for you here.
Okay.
Hello, caller.
Hello. Yeah, I have a question. Dr. Osborne, you mentioned earlier that all the other things that are in a vaccination, and one of the things you mentioned was neutralizers, I think. Neutralizers of, I'm curious what those are, what those are neutralizing, and I'll take my answer offline.
Thank you, caller.
All right, thanks. Well, that's a good question, and what is it neutralizing but maybe some of the other additives in the vaccination itself. But a lot of times it's, they may be adding just in the sodium bicarb to, be a pH neutralizer as well. Let me see if this says any mention more of what that might be. No.
So if there's a strong preservative like formaldehyde, they may do something that lessens that side effect? Put a neutralizer
Possibly, but I
there?
doubt that.
Okay.
I mean, just because, understanding how things are preserved and how they work. That.
And now, do you know anything about the history of some of the unfortunate consequences of vaccines? I've heard, like, in the 40s, and I think it's one of the reasons there's so much push to get them still, is in the 40s there was a whole slew of either polio or smallpox vaccines that really injured a lot of people.
That's true.
That is true.
That is true.
And some of it was deadly.
It was.
And I'm sure that did a lot to create a little bit of, or a lot of public hysteria around it. And I feel that that's how we got to this point of really pushing immunizations. Is back from then we just got in the routine of saying, no, we still have to go with immunizations, have confidence, you know, go with it, it's the way to go. There was a time when they said we'd end up curing all disease.
Right.
Through the immunization process. Is that still a widely held belief?
Well, it's like what I mentioned, even with the World Health Organization documenting the fact that through improved hygiene and sanitation, that most of the diseases diminished with that.
Yeah.
So
that sounds like the way to go for me. We do have another caller.
Okay.
And hello, are you there?
Hi, yes. I'd like to ask the doctor what she thinks about flu shots.
Okay.
Well, I definitely have my opinion about that. I've talked to a number of people about flu shots, and certainly the opinion is that flu shots probably bring on more flu cases than not, that you're better off without the flu shot than with it. There are some cases where there have been those who have fared better with getting a flu shot and not ending up with the flu throughout the season. But
do you think the flu shot brings on the flu right away?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you will find that actually that is what they also caution you about when you do get a flu shot, that you will feel the symptoms immediately. And there are some who have been quite sick from it. And my own personal belief is that it's not worth it, and that if you are very conscientious about yourself throughout the the general season, which is the winter season, that is, if you're watching your diet and you're protecting yourself and boosting your immune system. I mean, people generally start in about August or September to start boosting their immune system so that they're on track, so when the season starts coming through. And I lived in a town which was a tourist town. It was a ski area, and people come from all over the place, and by gosh, they're not going to give up their vacation even if they've got the flu. And so, a lot of us who lived in the town had to really protect ourselves before that season started, and got through it pretty well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, caller. And this brings up for me the holiday season. So this is more of a social nicety thing. How do you protect yourself in a nutritional way when everyone is everywhere you go? The way that they offer their generosity and their love for you is to offer you sweets and fats and glorpy goodies all over the place. What do you do? Are you
asking me personally what
I
do?
Yes, what do you do, or what would you recommend to do?
Well, I suppose I would put my own personal aspect into that. How would you best approach it? I'd have to do it myself. And that is that not to completely deny yourself, because there is also that belief that if you deny yourself, it causes you more stress in your system to deny that one thing that's sweet that you want than it is to eat that.
If it's something you truly want.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's not just over. And again, moderation. You have to limit that. You have to be moderate about it when you go to these parties or these gatherings, and there's lots available, and certainly there's always wine flowing and all kinds of cocktails, and so you have to decide yourself prior to something like that. It's also eating a meal before you go to these things, so that you're not feeling hungry, so that you're not inclined to eat all the little snacks that are available because you haven't eaten a meal.
And you've gotten the stuff that you need.
Yes.
Yeah.
So that if you do eat a sweet, that it's not going to be as devastating to your system, or if you have a glass of wine or 2 or 3, that you have prepared your body well enough to be absorbing it.
Now, I worked at a visiting nurse association for 3-some years, a while back, and they were the main people that did the flu immunizations throughout the whole Bay Area.
They usually are in every community.
Yeah, and it was a big place, and they did a lot of them. And we would get calls with people that got really, really sick. But there are also people that get the flu on their own and get really, really sick as well. Is there anything to the idea that vaccines are going to have the harsh reactions with people that would get it anyway? Like even with kids, it seems there's a possibility that the children that get the bad reactions are the ones possibly that would get the polio anyway. So now they've got maybe epilepsy instead of polio. Is there anything to that? Has anybody ever looked at that?
Oh, yeah, they have.
And?
Yeah, and so that's their the controversy about it is, do we find that it's the host again is weakened and susceptible to that?
To whatever comes their way.
I mean, in my own family, we were all vaccinated with polio back in the late 50s, and my brother got the polio from the vaccination.
Oh, he did?
Yeah, and they were little sugar cubes then.
Right.
And
I
took the
think
sugar
that's what I
cube and
took.
ended up in the hospital. We were all quarantined, and I was too young to even remember any of it, but it was just one of those things that, whereas his body was probably, susceptible at that point in his life because maybe he was going through a growth spurt or something else was going on. He also had allergies, so he was most likely to be susceptible to that than the rest of us. So where does that come in? The fact that he's now, no longer, he never had any residuals from that. But they say if you've had polio, and then you've been so-called controlled from the polio, that it will resurge itself later in life. And I've seen that happen over and over again.
Resurge itself?
They get polio, it comes back.
Oh.
Yeah, and that goes back to the whole point about as we age, our body and our immune systems aren't as strong as the flu experience as well. That there are those who just don't have the strength, and they may be feeling that they're better off with getting the flu shot than not. And what else can you do? Okay, well, there are lots of other things you can do, and one of them is oxylococcinum. At the first symptom or the first inkling that you're getting something, a flu symptom, you take that.
Is there a word that I'd be more familiar with?
I know. I'm afraid it's not. You have to learn how to say this thing.
Say that once again.
Oxylococcinum. It's a homeopathic, and it's available very abundantly. At least I know there's lots of offices that carry it, and certainly health food stores, and depending where you are, if it's a pharmacy that carries natural substances, they'll carry it as well. I've seen that also available. And
you take this as soon as you get the symptoms, or as soon as you've been exposed?
Well, as soon as you think you've been exposed. If you have any concern, you can start taking that. The first sign of any symptom, but if you let it go, it won't help you.
Okay, and this will pretty much cover most flus that come our way?
Most.
Okay.
Yeah, they try to stay up with that too. I've been led to believe.
Okay, and I think we are just about ready for our second musical break with Krishna and Yuva. Is that how you pronounce your name? Yuva? Okay. Thank you very much for playing for us again. Thank you very much, Krishna and Yuva. And you're on your way back to Malaysia. You're here for a couple more weeks. Did you want to give out a phone number in case anyone wants to call you?
It's okay.
No? Okay. Well, we'll have to catch you next time you're coming through town. Thank you very much for being here. It's just beautiful. And we're back with Dr. Virginia Osborne, and we're still taking live calls. The phone number is 542-6228, 542-MCAT, and she's open to any questions. We're going to tie up a couple loose ends with the vaccines, and then I want to ask Virginia about fluoridation if we have time.
Okay.
Okay. And what were some of the things you wanted to make sure people knew?
Oh, well, first we were talking about at the break was just that when you have an immunization, you have, an antibody response, and that's
Okay.
all you get. But when you have a disease process, a natural course of illness involves the whole immune system, and in a more profound way than just one section of the immune system that the immunization is going for. So, again, I wanted to iterate that, with vaccinations, there are the pros to that and the cons to that. This is giving you information that hopefully will help you make a better decision in vaccinations.
Okay.
And from the National Vaccine Information Center, they have 8 points that they'd like you to know about. That is, know before you vaccinate, is my child sick right now? Has my child had a bad reaction to a vaccination before? Does my child have a personal or family history of vaccine reactions, convulsions, or neurological disorders? Severe allergies and immune system disorders? Do I know if my child is at a high risk of reacting? Do I have full information on the vaccine side effects? Do I know how to identify a vaccine reaction? And that's going to be really important for you to know. Do I know how to report a vaccine reaction? Who do you go to? Is it public health? Is it your physician? Are you going to feel that you're going to get enough backup if you do report it? Do I know the vaccine manufacturer's name and lot number? And then the other thing is, too, is there any child in the family who's had vaccinations that had any reactions as well? And that's another thing to be aware of, too.
So you don't just go back in lineage, you go sideways, too?
You do.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess most parents would know about this, but what would be included in neurological disorders?
Well, that's when we're talking about epilepsies or
Okay.
seizure disorders, or even if the child's blacking out, and if you have any spasming kind of things, which would be along the line of an epileptic seizure or any kind of petite small seizure that we call them, little rapid eye movement kind of things. The convulsions, nausea. Of course, they do forewarn you that there's fevers and nausea, and they could throw up.
Okay.
Diarrhea.
Diarrhea? Okay. And what was one of the other ones? Can you list what are possible side effects of a vaccine?
When you're looking at side effects of vaccinations, there's some things you just mentioned right now, the
Okay.
neurological and the diarrhea and the vomiting. And
Okay.
the other thing is that each immunization may have a different reaction in each child.
Okay.
We talked about it earlier, the DPT shots, and when the child, you take them home and they sleep for 24 hours.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually a reaction to the vaccination.
Okay. And a 2-month-old, the parents might be sort of relieved.
Like you said, with the colicky baby, yes. Okay.
Right. But is that a severe reaction? Is that one you would want to report?
Not necessarily, no. They'll say yes, that's very common, and
That's normal. Okay.
that's what they'll say, yes.
But then that gives you more information about your choice in the future.
It does.
Because if you've started it, it doesn't compel you to finish the series, does it?
No.
You can always say, this isn't working for us. And,
No.
okay. How about high fevers? Fever of any kind, would that be a reaction?
That is reaction, yes.
That is
a reaction, and they do forewarn you about that.
And how long after the vaccine could a reaction happen?
Well, it can happen almost immediately, or
Okay.
it can be 24 hours to 3 days later, or even longer. There have been sudden infant deaths linked to vaccinations.
How much after? How much
Well, they
Longer.
generally see it within a few days.
within a few days?
Mm-hmm.
And there are all sorts of hypotheses about
Yeah.
SIDS, and
Mhm.
yeah, it hasn't been pinpointed or clarified, but there has seemingly been a reaction sometimes with the vaccines. Would you feel all right explaining how we got into this reliance on outside remedies? When did we start losing our trust in our own bodies that we would give kids Ritalins and antidepressants and immunizations, all in the hope that we're keeping our kids as healthy as they can be?
Well, it's all been a progression. I mean, since certainly when antibiotics came on in the 40s, the penicillin, and we had the ability to, you know, as they say, knock out the bacterial problems, and so people thought that was great. I mean, they hadn't had that before, and so there were lives that were being saved that hadn't before, and so that starts it. And then, you know, there's a building process. In the 50s, it was, you know, all the big push for the immunizations, and you know, going to see your family doctor was a rarity. You know, there was less dependence on the doctor than on the family knowledge. And as time goes on and we became a more transient community, that's when we started relying on our healthcare practitioners more and our families less, because we didn't have that community anymore of family.
And I don't want to minimize at all the tough choices people are making. One of the big things about you being here is just so people have as much information as they can get. When we went to our pediatrician when our daughter was very young, we didn't get the paperwork until after he gave the shots.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You do the paperwork first before you have the shots.
Well, he had talked to us. I had a lot of questions. I always have a lot of questions, but he didn't tell us about all those things on those sheets of paper, and he handed those to us as we were leaving. And I asked other parents, and this is not uncommon.
No, it's not.
And I thought, now that's kind of unkosher. You know, I really want to be part of the decision-making process, and I want as much information as I can get.
Informed consent.
Yeah. We have another caller here. So, hello, caller.
Yeah, Dr. Osborne, could you explain something about the injections with concentrated herbs for healing diseases?
What specifically are you thinking of?
Well, when they put the IV in the arm and they drip it in the blood veins, you know, for curing diseases, concentrated herbs, you know, how they produce a product, I don't know, but it's just a high concentrate of herbs.
Well, I personally am not quite familiar with the IV injection of herbs. I am of vitamins and minerals.
Yeah, this would be actually herbs, but I just wondered if you knew anything about it.
Well, I know something about that, and it's actually quite well used in Europe and in Canada, probably every other country in the world other than the United States, and that is that they have found great success with inoculation, actually, I guess I would say that, of these herbs, because it's not naturally occurring in the system, to help boost the immune system. Echinacea is one of those that has been widely used even as an IM injection to help boost the immune system. Actually, echinacea works on the level of keeping your immune system where it is and not letting it drop any further or diminish any further than it is. And so that's about all I can really tell you about the herbal IV or IM injections.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Thank you, caller. And just as a small aside, IV is intravenous. What's IM?
Intramuscular.
Intramuscular.
So that's when you have an injection into the muscle.
Is that what they do with gamma globulin shots?
Yes.
Okay. The ones that hurt the most.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
It's usually because they're thick.
Yeah.
And it also has to do with how much you tense your muscle when you're getting the injection.
Right. They don't usually teach you how to meditate during that.
No, but there are ways that you can do that will help cause that muscle to relax. And actually, the veterinarians, have always been great about that with their animals, and how to get them. Because they can't get them to deep breathe. They can't get them to, do a mantra or anything while they're getting injections. And so they do, a physiological thing, because it's sort of almost a autonomic response. It's just to tighten up that muscle, and it's there. And then you think you're relaxed, and it's still tight. So you just kind of set the body in motion by doing this, because the body's ready for that hit of the injection. So you just kind of tap around the area, and it kind of helps relax that muscle. Really, but with ourselves who can speak and whatnot, we have other vocal things that we can do and say and deep breathe, at the time. And so that kind of takes the mind off from that focus point, and that's really the whole point of that.
Well,
not pun intended. No pun intended.
Great
there.
techniques. I wanted to ask, it sort of fits into the idea that, we can medicate our way out of a lot of ills, physical ills. What's how did fluoride get to be pretty much across the board. Most large communities have fluoridated water, right?
They do now, and we're a quick fix kind of society now. That's the other thing. As things have sped up, it's medicine has done the same thing. And
drive-through.
Yeah, drive-through. and so it's really expecting the quick fix, and if it doesn't happen real quick, then you move on and find the thing that will. And a lot of times, especially in naturopathic medicine, it has to be a slower process because the disease process was slower in getting to the point that it did. You have to sort of, build it back up.
To get to the cause as opposed to the symptom.
Right. So, but that's to just make a comment to that. And as far as fluoridating and fluoridation, that started in a study done in Colorado Springs, Colorado, because they had natural occurring fluoride there, and there were other communities around them that did not. So they did a cross study on how was the dental basically of the individuals in each community improved by the fluoride versus not. And actually in the original studies, there was no change. There was no difference.
Oh, there wasn't?
No.
And this is the basis for the fluoridation?
Right, so it just goes to show, like they always say, you can always take a study and use the point that you want to make with it and drop the rest. So they went with that, and certainly there's companies that can benefit by having fluoridation in big major cities. I mean, I think that speaks for itself. There are some communities that have gotten it out of their waters, but recently I was told by a particular dentist in Colorado Springs, Dr. Hal Huggins, that that the city of Colorado Springs has now received a grant to put fluoride in their water, and so what is the point of that?
They already have
it naturally occurring. Yeah.
What would be the point of that?
So yeah, we sort of leave that question out there, but again, it's been proven that with good oral hygiene, that the teeth and the gums really do stay healthy. And of course, our stress levels have something to say about that, and
getting enough water. Our nutrition also affects our oral hygiene.
Absolutely.
So what's a good oral hygiene routine?
Well, it's the flossing and the brushing, and at least 2 times a day. If you can do it after every meal, that's the ideal. And any dentist will tell you that. Any hygienist will tell you that. Some of them believe that the light rinsing of fluoride on the teeth when there is a starting of decay has helped prevent that. I don't know how I want to stand with that one. That's something I just heard recently from a dentist. So my stand on that is that it's not the fluoride that's really changing the dental. It's the awareness that each individual has, and if they don't brush their teeth, they're not going to have much teeth left or gums.
Right, and there are a lot of commercials on TV for water picks and toothpaste and toothbrushes, newfangled shapes and designs. I want you to correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was that fluoride was, as far as the history, the progression of this, was originally, I don't know how to put this mildly, a toxic waste from a manufacturing facility, and that they were actually getting sued by the residents downriver for this pollutant in the water. And they found out or realized that they could actually turn this toxic waste that otherwise they'd have to pay a lot of money to get rid of, and they found out that it might possibly be useful for teeth and lack of, keeping decay away. And they turned that whole, is this way off? I mean,
no, that is a scenario that occurred.
It is.
That is, but how do you when you find communities that are very remote that have fluoride naturally occurring in the water, it's not that it's been put there, it's natural occurring from nature. So you have to, if you have a well, it's good to get that checked to see what the levels are, because too much fluoride, then of course, there's the mottled teeth. And
mottled teeth from fluoride.
From excess fluoride.
And I want to ask one question first before we go on. Is the fluoride the same, a chemically created or byproduct, the same as naturally occurring fluoride?
No, there's 2 different types.
Okay.
They are, and the one that's most toxic is what they put in our toothpaste and what they put in, the water and what they put into our foods.
And what is an excess of fluoride?
You know what? I'm sorry I didn't bring that information with me. There are parts per million.
Okay. But if you're going to the dentist and getting the fluoride rinses and using fluoride toothpaste and drinking fluoride in the water, would that probably be excessive?
Yeah.
Okay. And I want you to tell me what you know about fluoride use in Germany during World War II.
Well, that was something that was documented about Nazi Germany, and of course, as we all know, most of us have at least some understanding of what happened with Nazi Germany and
right.
the control and how Hitler was able to bring everybody under one roof, so to speak. And one of the ways that they were able to do that was to put fluoride in the water. And that was their intention, yeah, was to put the fluoride in the water, high concentrations, in order because it works on the neurological effect and to make you more complacent. And
makes people more complacent.
Mm-hmm.
It numbs the neurological system?
I don't know that I could go that far to say that. Okay. It's the biochemical reaction that occurs that it also works on the brain, and that the individuals are then less likely to protest and react.
Okay.
Not that reacting is always the most appropriate approach, but action is, and left more individuals less likely to act.
This has been a really fascinating hour and a half for me, and I'd really like to have you back if you're available again in the fall to talk more about some of the things you do to help keep people healthy. Mm-hmm. And I'll just put a little tease out there. There's something called wet socks.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about that when you come back. And thank you very much for being here. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. And if anyone has any calls or questions for Dr. Virginia Osborne, her phone number is 642-3761. For anybody on the crew for the Heidi Show, 829-9162. If anyone would like to do a video project, call MCAT 542-6228. And thanks again to the musicians, and thank you very much to the crew. Have a really glorious week. Thank you.